The alarm on Ember's Rest had not sounded in 47 years. Captain was drinking his morning coffee when the piercing wail tore through the station. He dropped the cup and ran to the command deck, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Report," he shouted as he burst through the doors. Lieutenant was already at her station, her fingers flying across the communications console. Her face had gone pale. "Sir, we have an incoming signal. It's an SOS." Stopped. The monitoring station had orbited this dead world for 300 years, watching the silent galaxy beyond humanity's borders. 300 years of nothing. 300 years of peace. Source asked quietly. "System, sir, 16 light-years beyond the barrier," looked up at him. "It's not human." The other crew members were filing onto the deck now. Doctor, the stations, moved to stand beside. The old man's eyes were sharp behind his glasses. He had spent his entire career studying records of alien species that humanity had not seen in 3 centuries. "Play it," ordered. The message crackled through the speakers. The voice was high-pitched, trembling with fear. The translation matrix worked slowly, converting the alien language into words they could understand. "This is Refuge World 7. We are under attack. The Dominion has broken through our defenses. They are killing everyone. We have nowhere left to run. Please, if anyone can hear this, we are dying. We need help. This is our final transmission." The message ended. Silence filled the command deck. Spoke first. "I know that name." He rushed to a terminal and began searching through the old archives. His hands shook as he typed. 400 years ago. Yes, here it is. The colony ship Morning Star was lost in deep space. Their life support was failing. A merchant fleet found them and shared their supplies. They saved 2,000 human lives. Looked at the data streaming across her screen. "Sir, according to this signal, there are millions of still alive on that world, but not for long." Stared at the viewport. Beyond it lay the vast emptiness of space, and beyond that, the galaxy that humanity had left behind. After the Cascade Wars, after the blood and fire and endless dying, humanity had made a choice. They built a barrier of monitoring stations and said, "No more. Let the galaxy forget us. Let us forget the galaxy." But the galaxy had not forgotten, or at least they had not. "How long?" asked. "Sir, did not understand." "How long do they have?" Checked her instruments. Based on the attack patterns in the message, maybe 48 hours, perhaps less. Pulled up an image on the main screen. It showed a family from the old records. They were tall and slender with soft blue skin and large eyes. They looked gentle, kind. The image had been taken aboard the Morning Star 400 years ago. A merchant was handing food packages to human children. "They saved us once," said quietly. "They asked for nothing in return." Turned to face his crew. 23 men and women who had lived their entire lives in the long silence. They had never seen war. They had only read about it in the history files, seen the recordings of burning worlds and ships torn apart in the void. "You all know what this means," said. "If we respond to this signal, we break the isolation. We wake the fleets. We become part of the galaxy again." A young engineer named spoke up. "Sir, the long silence was meant to protect us, to protect the galaxy from us. The Cascade Wars." "I know the history," Lieutenant interrupted. "I know what we did, what we became." He paused. "But I also know what we were. We were the species that fought to protect the weak. We were the ones who stood between the darkness and the light." "Sir," said, her voice steady now, "regulations state that any decision to break the long silence must be voted on by the entire crew." Nodded. "Then we vote. All in favor of answering this call of waking the fleets, raise your hand." His hand went up immediately. Thence and the others one by one, until every hand on the deck was raised. Looked at them all, these young people who were choosing to end an age of peace. "Very well, I concur." He walked to the command console and placed his hand on the biometric scanner. Authorization, Captain Ember's Rest. I hereby activate Protocol Titan. The console flashed red. Deep in the station's core, systems that had been dormant for 3 centuries roared to life. The signal began to broadcast on channels that had been silent since the last war ended. Across human space, in hidden shipyards buried in asteroid fields, in dockyards orbiting dead stars, in armories built into hollow moons, machines began to wake. Lights flickered on in the darkness. Reactors that could power worlds hummed with building energy. Weapons that could crack planets started their boot-up sequences. And in chambers deep within the largest ships, where the greatest warriors of humanity slept their dreamless sleep, ice began to melt. Watched her console. Sir, Fleet Command is responding. They're asking for confirmation. Tell them, said, that they need us. Tell them we have a debt to pay. Pulled up a star chart. The route to system cut through dangerous space, regions of radiation storms and collapsed stars. Captain, even our fastest ships would need 2 weeks to reach them. Then they better hurry, said. He opened the comm channel to Fleet Command. This is Captain of Ember's Rest. 300 years ago we hung up our swords because we were tired of war, but we never broke them. We never forgot how to fight, and we never forgot our debts. He paused. They saved 2,000 of our people when no one else would. Now millions of them are dying. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what it takes. We answer this call. The response from Fleet Command came quickly. A voice did not recognize, but one filled with old authority. Ember's Rest, this is Admiral Sangho. I have received your signal. The First Fleet is awake. We are moving to, tell them to hold on. Tell them we remember. Tell them we're coming. On screen, dozens of energy signatures began appearing across the sector. Ships pulling out of hiding. War machines built for one purpose, to win battles that could not be won by anyone else. Looked at his crew. Young faces, now marked with the weight of what they had just done. They had ended the long silence. The galaxy would soon remember what humanity was, what humanity could do when roused. Send a message to they, ordered. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to survive just a little longer. As the message raced toward at faster-than-light speed, allowed herself a small smile. The Titans were awake, and they were angry. Admiral Sangho opened his eyes to a world of pain. The sleep withdrawal hit him like a hammer, every muscle in his body screaming as warmth returned to frozen tissue. He gasped, his lungs burning as they remembered how to breathe. Easy, Admiral, a medical officer said, helping him sit up. You've been under for a long time. Sangho looked at his hands. They were the hands of a young man kept preserved by the sleep. But he felt ancient. 300 years. 300 years of dreamless darkness, and before that, the Cascade Wars. He could still see the burning worlds when he closed his eyes. Why am I awake? His voice was rough, unused. Protocol Titan has been activated, sir. They are under attack. Captain of Ember's Rest has called for the fleets. Sangho stood slowly. His body remembered how to move even after centuries. Get me to the bridge, now. The medical officer helped him walk through the corridors of the dreadnought Iron Requiem. The ship was alive again, its systems humming with power. Sangho could feel it through the deck plates. This ship had been his home during the wars. It had carried him through 100 battles. It had never failed him. On the bridge, the crew was already assembling. Commander stood at the tactical station, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. She was young, maybe 30 years old. She had been born during the long silence, trained on simulations of wars she had never seen. Admiral on deck, someone called. Turned and saluted. Sangho returned the gesture and moved to the command chair. It fit him perfectly, as if 300 years had been only a moment. Reports, he ordered. Gestured to the display. Sir, we have 48 ships awakened so far. More are coming online every hour. They are in the system, 16 light years from our position. The Dominion has them surrounded. The Sangho said. He searched his memory. The name was not familiar. Who are they? A military empire that rose 200 years ago, explained. They conquer other species and enslave them. They've taken over 12 star systems in the last 50 years. The galactic community has protested, but no one has stopped them. Sangho studied the tactical display. The fleet surrounding the world was large, maybe 300 ships. They were using standard siege tactics, cutting off all escape routes while bombardment forces moved into position. What do we know about military capabilities? Sangho asked. A technical officer spoke up. Sir, their shields are rated at approximately 70 terawatts. Their weapons use plasma-based systems, effective range about 400,000 kilometers. Their ships are heavily armored but relatively slow. Sangho almost smiled. 70 terawatts. During the Cascade Wars, humanity had faced enemies with shields rated at 200 terawatts, and they had learned to cut through them like paper. How long to reach at maximum speed? He asked. Checked her calculations. 48 hours, sir. But our engineers are saying we can push the quantum drives harder. If we're willing to risk it, we could make it in 40 hours. 40 hours. They might not have that long. Sangho looked at the display again, at the little blue dot that represented the refuge world. Millions of lives hanging by a thread. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure, Sangho ordered. Maximum burn. I don't care if we burn out half the drives. We get there in 40 hours. Yes, sir. Turn to relay the orders. Deep in the engineering sections was working frantically. The quantum drives had not been used in 300 years, and pushing them to their limits was dangerous. But the order had come down from the Admiral himself. Get there in 40 hours. Redirect power from life support backups, shouted to his team. Divert everything non-essential to the drives. We're going to make this ship fly like she did in the old days. The Iron Requiem was the largest ship in the fleet, 2 kilometers of war machine. Her weapons could level continents. Her shields could withstand the blast of a small star. She had been built for one purpose: total war. As the fleet formed up, other ships emerged from their hiding places. The cruiser Silent Dawn pulled out from behind a moon. The carrier Endless Sky rose from an asteroid field where it had slept for centuries. Fighter wings launched from hidden bays, their pilots fresh from sleep but trained to perfection. On the Iron Requiem's bridge, Sangho watched the fleet assemble. 48 ships now, with more joining every hour. It was not the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. During the Cascade Wars, they had sent thousands of ships into battle, but it would be enough. Sir, said, we're receiving reports from galactic monitoring networks. Other species have detected our energy signatures. They're trying to identify us. Let them wonder, Sangho said. Initiate quantum jump on my mark. The crew worked efficiently, each person knowing their role. They had trained for this, even though they thought it would never happen. The long silence was supposed to last forever. Sangho thought about the message from Captain. They had saved 2,000 human lives 400 years ago. They had asked for nothing, expected nothing. And now they were dying, and they had sent out a desperate call into the void, hoping someone would answer. Someone had answered. Humanity had answered. All ships report ready for jump, sir, said. Sangho leaned forward in his command chair. Through the viewport, he could see the other ships of the fleet, their running lights bright against the darkness of space. Beautiful and terrible, ships built for war by a species that had perfected it. All ships, Sangho broadcasted on the fleet channel. 300 years ago, we decided we were done with war. We were tired of the killing, tired of the dying. We wanted peace. He paused. But peace does not mean we forgot how to fight. Peace does not mean we abandon those who need us. They saved our people once, and now we will save theirs. Today, the galaxy remembers what humanity is. Today, they remember why they should have left us alone. On ships across the fleet, crews responded with determination. They were ready. "Execute jump," Sangho ordered. Space twisted. Reality bent. The quantum drives opened holes in the fabric of space-time, and the human fleet vanished, racing toward at speeds that should have been impossible. Behind them, on Ember's Rest, Captain watched the energy signatures disappear from his screens. Stood beside him. "Do you think they'll make it in time?" she asked. Nodded slowly. "If anyone can, it's Admiral Sangho. During the Cascade Wars, he did the impossible on a daily basis." Across the galaxy, sensors detected the quantum jumps. Automated systems flagged the unusual energy patterns. Intelligence analysts looked at the data and frowned. These signatures did not match any known species. The power outputs were enormous, far beyond what modern ships could generate. In the Dominion capital, a military commander received a report about strange ships moving toward. He dismissed it. Probably merchants or refugees. Nothing that could threaten a siege fleet. On the refuge world, elder counselors stood in the command center, watching the fleet tighten its grip. They had maybe 24 hours left, maybe less. "Elder," a communications officer said, "we received a response to our SOS." Turned, hope flickering in his old eyes. "From whom?" They said they were human." His breath caught. Humans. The story said they were gone, vanished into the darkness, but remembered the old records the stories passed down through generations. Humans had been warriors, protectors, terrifying and kind in equal measure. "What did they say?" asked. The officer played the message. It was short, direct. "Hold on, we remember, we're coming." Looked up at the ceiling, at the sky beyond where death was slowly descending. "Alert all shelters," he ordered. "Tell the people to hold on. Tell them help is coming." In the void between stars, the human fleet raced forward, crossing distances that would take other species weeks in mere hours. In the command chair of the Iron Requiem, Admiral Sangho counted down the time. 40 hours. Just hold on for 40 hours. Commander checked her gear one last time. The dropship trembled around her as it prepared for launch from the carrier Endless Sky. Around her, 50 Marines did the same, their faces hard and focused. They were the first strike force, the tip of the spear. 2 minutes to drop, the pilot announced. Looked out the viewport. The system spread before them, and at its center the refuge world glowed blue and green, beautiful, peaceful, and completely surrounded by warships. The human fleet had arrived 30 minutes ago, appearing at the edge of the system in perfect formation. The HAD detected them immediately. Could imagine the confusion on their bridges. Who were these ships? Where had they come from? They were about to find out. On the Iron Requiem, Admiral Sangho watched the tactical display. 347 vessels, arranged in siege formation around the world. They had not moved since the human fleet arrived, probably trying to figure out what to do. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the fleet commander," reported. "Put it through," Sangho said. A face appeared on the screen. The commander was large, with thick gray skin and small, cruel eyes. He wore ornate armor decorated with symbols of conquered worlds. "Unknown vessels," the said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You have entered territory. Identify yourselves immediately or be destroyed." Sangho stood slowly from his command chair. He looked at the commander with eyes that had seen wars this creature could not imagine. "You wouldn't remember us," Sangho said quietly, "but you should have." The commander's eyes narrowed. "What species are you? State your designation." "We are humans," Sangho replied, "and you are in our way." The commander laughed. "Humans, the myths, the ghosts," he leaned forward. "You should have stayed hidden, little ghosts. Now you will join your friends in extinction. All ships prepare to engage the unknown fleet." The transmission cut off. On the tactical display, the ships began moving into attack formation. Looked at Sangho, "Sir." Sangho sat back down. All ships activate battle shields, weapons free. Show them what 300 years of peace bought us. Show them what we built while they played at war. Across the human fleet, weapons systems came online. The Iron Requiem's main cannons extended from their housing. These were not the weapons of 300 years ago. During the long silence, humanity had not been idle. They had refined their technology, perfected their weapons. If they ever had to fight again, they wanted to be ready. They were ready. The fleet opened fire first. Plasma bolts filled the space between the fleets, brilliant streaks of superheated matter traveling at a fraction of light speed. It was an impressive display of firepower. The shots hit the human shields and dissipated harmlessly. On the flagship, the commander stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Impossible. Our weapons have 75% penetration against standard shields. Sir, his tactical officer said, voice shaking, their shields are reading at over 300 terawatts. I've never seen anything like it. The human fleet did not return fire immediately. They advanced, moving through the formations like sharks through schools of fish. The ships tried to maneuver, tried to bring more weapons to bear, but the human ships were faster, more responsive. Sat in the cockpit of his fighter, the Phantom Wing, watching the capital ships move. He led a squadron of 12 fighters, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. Sleek, fast, and armed with weapons that could punch through battleship armor. Phantom Squadron, he broadcast. We have clearance for atmospheric entry. The shelters need air support. Let's show the what happens when they threaten the defenseless. His squadron acknowledged and followed him down. They hit the atmosphere at speeds that should have torn them apart, but their shields held. Below, ground forces were advancing on the last shelters. Targeting system locked on, weapons free. The fighters opened fire. Their cannons used magnetic acceleration to fire projectiles at incredible speeds. Each round hit with the force of a small bomb. Tanks exploded. Infantry positions vanished in clouds of fire and debris. On the ground, civilians looked up in wonder as the strange ships tore through their attackers. Elder stood at the entrance to the largest shelter, tears streaming down his face. They had come. The humans had actually come. In orbit, Admiral Sangho decided it was time to end this. Target the flagship. Main cannons, fire. The Iron Requiem's primary weapons discharged. The cannons used focused gravitational waves, technology humanity had perfected during the long silence. The beams were invisible until they hit their target. The flagship's shields lit up as they tried to absorb the impact. They held for almost 3 seconds. Then they shattered. The gravitational beams punched through the hull, tearing the massive ship apart from the inside out. The explosion was visible across the entire system. Sir, said her voice tight, the remaining ships are attempting to flee. Sangho watched the tactical display. The fleet was breaking apart, ships scattering in every direction. Their arrogance had turned to panic. Let them run, Sangho said, but send a message first. I want every ship in this system to hear it. Opened all channels. Dominion, Sangho broadcast, you came here to destroy the defenseless. You came here to enslave and conquer, but you made one mistake. You threatened a species that helped us once long ago. We do not forget our debts, and we do not tolerate bullies. On the remaining ships, crews listened in terror. Run back to your empire, Sangho continued. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them that humanity has returned. Tell them that the galaxy has protectors again. And tell them that if we ever catch them enslaving another species, we will not be so merciful next time. The ships jumped to faster-than-light speed, fleeing in every direction. In less than an hour, the siege was broken. Commander's dropship landed near the main shelter. She stepped out, her marines forming a protective perimeter. Elder approached slowly, flanked by his guards. You came, said in accented but understandable human language. We did not truly believe you would come. Removed her helmet. Your people saved 2,000 of ours 400 years ago. Did you think we would forget that? Looked at the human soldiers, at their advanced armor and weapons. We thought you were extinct. The galaxy said you had vanished. We chose to leave, explained. We were tired of war, but we never stopped watching, and when we heard your call, she gestured to the sky where the human fleet orbited. We answered. In orbit was analyzing the tactical data from the battle. Sir, the engagement lasted 17 minutes. We destroyed one capital ship and disabled 37 others. Our shields never dropped below 90%. We took no casualties. Sang-ho nodded slowly. They had been confident, arrogant. They had built an empire on the backs of weaker species, never facing real opposition. They had not been prepared for humanity. No one was prepared for humanity. Sir, the communications officer said, we're receiving thousands of transmissions from across the galaxy. Everyone wants to know who we are. The Galactic Council is demanding we identify ourselves. Sang-ho smiled slightly. Tell the Galactic Council that humanity accepts their invitation to rejoin galactic society. Tell them we have some concerns about certain aggressive empires that need to be addressed. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, people watched the recordings of the battle. They saw the fleet, powerful and unstoppable, meet the human ships. They saw the siege broken in minutes. They saw an empire that had conquered 12 systems flee in terror. And they asked themselves, who are these humans? Where have they been? And more importantly, what will they do next? On the refuge world, celebrations had begun. Millions of people who had been hours from death now danced in the streets, singing songs of gratitude. The human ships remained in orbit, watchful, protective. Landed his fighter near Commander's position. He climbed out and looked at the people celebrating around them. You know, he said too, I never thought I'd see combat. I trained for it, but I thought the long silence would last forever. Nodded. It was good while it lasted, but maybe this is better. Maybe the galaxy needed us back. Above them, the iron requiem hung in space like a sword of justice. Admiral Sang-ho stood on the bridge, looking down at the world they had saved. Commander approached. Sir, what now? Sang-ho thought about the question. What now indeed? The long silence was over. Humanity was back in the galaxy. And there were other species out there, other empires like who needed to learn what it meant to face human justice. Now, Sang-ho said, we remind the galaxy why they should fear the dark, because we live in it. Captain Sora stood on the command deck of the transport ship Mercy's Hand, watching the organized chaos unfold before her. 40 million needed to be evacuated from their dying world, and they had 72 hours to do it. How many have we loaded so far? She asked her second in command. 12 million, Captain. The quantum-fold cargo ships are working at maximum capacity, but they left the planet's infrastructure in ruins. Half the spaceports are destroyed. Sora looked at the holographic display. The refuge world was from the siege. Cities lay in rubble. Farmlands were burned. They had been thorough in their cruelty. Then we build new spaceports, Sora said. Deploy the construction drones. I want landing pads operational in every major population center within 6 hours. Down on the surface, families gathered their belongings, preparing to leave the only world most of them had ever known. Elder walked among his people, offering comfort and hope. Doctor had arrived from Ember's Rest, serving as the primary diplomat between humans and he found near one of the temporary landing zones. Elder said, bowing respectfully, the transport ships are ready for the next group. Looked at the massive human ships descending from the sky. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Where will you take us? He asked. We've identified 3 suitable worlds in neutral space, explained. All uninhabited, all capable of supporting life. You'll be safe there, and we'll help you rebuild. touched his arm gently. Why do so much for us? The debt was for 2,000 lives 400 years ago. You've saved 40 million. The debt is paid 100-fold. Smiled sadly. Elder, during our darkest time, your people helped ours without expecting anything in return. That's not a debt that can be measured in numbers. It's a debt of honor, of humanity. Meanwhile, in the ruins of a command post, Special Operations Officer and his team were examining the enemy's abandoned equipment. What they found made his blood run cold. "Captain Sora," he transmitted, "you need to see this." Sora's image appeared on his comm unit. "What did you find?" "Slave records," said, his voice tight. They weren't just conquering they were going to enslave them, sell them to other empires. And according to these files, they've been doing this to dozens of species across the sector. Sora's expression hardened. "How many species?" "At least 14, Captain, maybe more. Some of the records are encrypted." On the Iron Requiem, Admiral Sangho received report. He sat in silence for a long moment, reading through the translated files. Names of species he had never heard of. Populations in the millions, all enslaved, scattered across space and beyond. Commander stood beside him. "Sir." "They called us myths," Sangho said quietly. "Ghosts. They thought we were stories told to frighten children." He looked up at, "Maybe we were. But ghosts have a way of becoming real when injustice grows too great." He stood and walked to the observation window. The world turned slowly below, battered but not broken. "Get me a channel to Fleet Command," Sangho ordered, "and start analyzing those slave records. I want to know where every enslaved being is located. I want to know which empires are buying them. I want to know everything." Back on the surface, Captain Sora directed the evacuation with military precision. Human Marines moved through the ruined cities, helping civilians reach the landing zones. Medical teams treated the injured. Engineers repaired what they could and marked what needed to be destroyed. A young child approached one of the Marines, a woman named Private. The child held up a small toy, offering it shyly. "Knelt down, for me?" she asked gently. The child nodded. "Through a translator," she said, "thank you for saving my family." Felt tears sting her eyes. She accepted the toy carefully as if it were made of crystal. "You're welcome, little one. You're safe now, I promise." As the child ran back to her parents, looked up at the sky where human warships stood guard, she thought about the long silence, about 300 years of peace. And she realized that sometimes peace meant being ready to fight when others could not. 72 hours after the evacuation began, the last transport ship lifted off from the refuge world. Captain Sora watched from the Mercy's hand as the planet fell away beneath them. "All civilians accounted for, Captain," her officer reported. 40 million safe and en route to their new homes." Sora nodded. "Good work, everyone. Now let's get these people somewhere they can start over." The human convoy moved through space, warships surrounding the transport vessels like protective wolves around their pack. In one of the transports, Elder sat with his council, looking at star charts of their new worlds. Doctor joined them carrying a data pad. "Elder, I thought you should see this." He showed an old file, 400 years old. It was a message from the human colony ship Morning Star, sent after the had saved them. The message read, "To the merchants who shared their supplies with us, we will never forget your kindness. If ever you need help, if ever darkness comes to your door, call for us. Humanity remembers its debts. We will come." Read it twice, his eyes glistening with tears. 400 years, he whispered. 400 years and you still remembered." "We always remember," said. "That's what makes us human." On the Iron Requiem, Admiral Sangho reviewed the data from his investigation. The scope of the slave trade was staggering. 14 species, totaling nearly 60 million beings, scattered across 8 different empires. Commander stood at his shoulder, reading the reports. "Sir, If we move against them directly, we'll be starting a war. They started the war when they began enslaving innocent people, Sang-ho replied. We're just going to finish it. He opened a channel to Fleet Command. This is Admiral Sang-ho. Request immediate authorization to expand operations beyond. We have evidence of widespread slavery operations. We need more ships, more resources. The response came from the Admiralty on Earth. Admiral Sang-ho, you are authorized to proceed. Additional fleets are being awakened as we speak. The Galactic Council has sent a message. They want to meet with us. Sang-ho smiled without humor. Tell the Galactic Council we'll be happy to meet with them, right after we finish cleaning up the mess they ignored for the last 2 centuries. Days later, they reached their new worlds. The transports landed in valleys beside clear rivers, on plains beneath alien but beautiful skies. Human construction teams had already begun building temporary shelters, setting up power generators, establishing water purification systems. Elder stepped off the transport onto the soil of his new home. Around him, his people emerged, looking at the unscarred landscape with wonder and hope. Captain Sora stood nearby, watching the spread out, children running through fields that had never known war. Captain said, approaching her, how can we ever thank you? Sora looked at the old. Elder, 400 years ago, your people could have ignored a distress call from a species you didn't know, but you didn't. You helped because it was the right thing to do. She gestured to the human ships in orbit. We're just returning the favor. That's what civilized beings do. They help each other. Bow deeply. Then we are honored to call humanity our friends. As the sun set on the new world, humans worked side by side, building homes, planting crops, laying the foundations for a future that had almost been stolen from them. Above, in orbit, Admiral Sang-ho prepared for the next phase. The empire needed to answer for its crimes. And beyond them, other empires that had participated in the slave trade would learn what it meant to face human justice. On his tactical display, reports were coming in from across the sector. Other species were sending messages, some welcoming humanity back to the galaxy, others demanding they return to isolation, still others begging for help against their own oppressors. Sir said, we're receiving another SOS. It's from a species called They're under attack by forces. They're asking for help. Sang-ho looked at the message, then at the star chart showing the location. It was deep in space. A rescue mission would be dangerous, possibly triggering a full-scale war. He thought about the child giving her toy to Private. He thought about Elder's tears. He thought about the 2,000 humans saved 400 years ago by strangers who expected nothing in return. Plot a course, Sang-ho ordered. We're going in. Send a message to the hold on, we're coming. Around him, the crew moved with purpose. The Iron Requiem turned toward space, and behind it the rest of the human fleet followed. The Titans were awake, and they had work to do. 3 months had passed since the rescue. Admiral Sang-ho stood in the conference room of the Iron Requiem, looking at the holographic map that filled the center of the space. 14 species freed from slavery. 7 empires forced to surrender their slave markets. The Dominion reduced to half its former territory, its military shattered. Commander entered the room carrying a data pad. Sir, they have formally requested peace talks. They're willing to accept all our terms. Sang-ho studied the map. Red markers showed where they had fought battles. Blue markers showed freed populations. Green markers showed where human ships now patrolled, preventing future attacks. What are our casualties? He asked. 23 wounded, none killed, reported. The enemy couldn't penetrate our shields. Our technology is still decades ahead of anything in the current galaxy. Sang-ho nodded slowly. During the Cascade Wars, battles had cost thousands of lives. Ships had been destroyed. Worlds had burned. But this time, humanity had been prepared. They had been merciful when they could be, ruthless when they had to be. Accept the peace terms, Sang-Ho said. But make it clear, if they ever enslave another being, we will finish what we started. On Earth, in the capital city that had grown during the long silence, the Galactic Council had finally been granted an audience with the human government. Ambassadors from 50 species gathered in the Great Hall, waiting. Doctor was among the human delegation. He had become one of the primary voices for humanity in galactic affairs, his gentle nature balancing the military might that had shocked the galaxy. The council speaker, a being from a species called the, stood to address the assembly. 3 months ago, humanity returned to the galaxy after 300 years of silence. In that time, they have upended the balance of power, freed millions of enslaved beings, and humbled empires that thought themselves untouchable. The speaker paused. The council wishes to know, what does humanity want? Stood to respond. We want what we've always wanted, peace. But we learned at terrible cost during the Cascade Wars that peace without strength is just waiting to be destroyed. We left the galaxy because we were tired of war, but we see now that our absence allowed cruelty to flourish. An ambassador stood, his voice bitter. You destroyed our fleets. You took our conquered territories. You humiliated us before the entire galaxy. Looked at the calmly. You enslaved innocent people. You murdered millions. You believed might gave you the right to do as you pleased. He gestured to the freed species representatives in the room. We simply showed you that you were not as mighty as you believed. Captain, now promoted to Admiral of the Monitoring Network, stood beside. The long silence was a mistake, he said. We thought if we removed ourselves from galactic affairs, peace would follow, but nature abhors a vacuum. When the strong withdraw, the cruel take their place. Another ambassador from a peaceful species that had suffered under raids spoke up. But what happens now? Will humanity become the new? Will you conquer and rule through fear? Sang-Ho had been standing at the back of the room, listening. Now he walked forward and the room fell silent. Everyone knew who he was, the Ghost Admiral, the warrior who had broken thee in less than a week. We don't want to rule you, Sang-Ho said, his voice carrying through the hall. We don't want your resources or your territory. We don't want tribute or submission. He looked around at the assembled species. We want you to be free, free to live your lives without fear of being enslaved or conquered. Then what do you want in return? The council speaker asked. We want a promise, Sang-Ho replied. We want the galaxy to promise that it will stand against oppression, that when the weak cry for help, the strong will answer. We can't be everywhere. We can't protect everyone. But we can make sure that those who prey on the defenseless know there will be consequences. Back on Ember's Rest, Lieutenant, now Commander, sat at her communications station. The station that had been silent for so long was now the busiest node in the human monitoring network. Every day, messages came in from across the galaxy. Some were thank you messages from freed populations. Some were requests for trade and diplomacy. And some were SOS signals. She flagged a new transmission and sent it up the chain. Another species in trouble. Another call for help. On the new, Elder walked through fields of grain, watching his people rebuild their civilization. In the distance, a human construction team was helping build a new school. Children played with human children, the offspring of soldiers who had decided to stay and help. His grandson ran up to him, excited. Grandfather, the humans are teaching us about their history, about the Cascade Wars. Did you know they fought for 200 years? Knelt down, looking at the young one. I did. They fought until they could fight no more, and then they chose peace. But they came back to fight for us, the child said. Why? Smiled, touching his grandson's cheek. Because, little one, they are humanity. They may be warriors, but they are also protectors, and they never forget a debt. Captain Sara had been given command of a new initiative, the Watch. It was a permanent fleet dedicated to protecting vulnerable species. Ships patrolled key trade routes, responded to distress calls, and made sure that empires like the thought twice before enslaving their neighbors. Commander served under her, leading rapid response teams. Commanded a wing of fighters stationed at strategic points throughout the sector. Had been promoted to head of intelligence, tracking down remnants of the slave trade. They worked together, a team forged in the fires of the rescue, dedicated to making sure no other species would have to send a desperate SOS into the void and hope someone answered. Now chief engineer of the fleet, continued to maintain and improve the war machines. But he also designed new ships, transport vessels, medical ships, construction ships, tools of peace as impressive as their tools of war. 6 months after the rescue, the Galactic Council formally recognized humanity's role as protectors. It was not a title humanity wanted, but it was one they accepted. With it came responsibility, but also respect. Admiral Sangho retired from active command, passing leadership of the military to younger officers. But he did not go quietly into peaceful rest. Instead, he became an instructor at the new military academy, teaching the next generation of human warriors. On his first day of class, he looked at the young cadets before him. They had been born during the long silence. They had never known war, but they would carry the responsibility of preventing it. 300 years ago, Sangho told them, we put away our weapons because we were tired of war. We thought if we hid, if we turned away from the galaxy, peace would follow. He paused. We were wrong. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of justice, and justice requires strength. A young cadet raised her hand. Sir, how do we know when to fight and when to seek peace? Sangho smiled. That's the question, isn't it? Here's what I learned. Fight when you must, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. But never fight out of anger or pride or the desire for conquest. Fight only when there is no other choice. And when you do fight, fight to end the war, not to prolong it. Admiral stood on the bridge of Ember's Rest, now the command center for the entire monitoring network. Commander worked beside him, as she had from the beginning. Another SOS just came in, reported. They are having disputes with their neighbors. They're asking for mediation. Nodded. Send a diplomatic team. Let's see if we can solve this one without firing a shot. That was the new way. Humanity had returned to the galaxy not as conquerors but as guardians. They preferred diplomacy to battle, cooperation to conflict. But every species knew that if pushed, if innocents were threatened, the war titans would wake again. And they would be merciless. On the anniversary of the rescue, a memorial was erected on their new. It was a simple stone monument with an inscription in both and human languages. 400 years ago, strangers helped strangers without expecting anything in return. 1 year ago, that kindness was repaid. May all species remember, compassion is never forgotten, and debts of honor transcend time. Elder attended the dedication ceremony. He was very old now, his time growing short, but he stood proudly as Admiral Sangho unveiled the memorial. Thank you, said simply, for everything. Sangho bowed respectfully. Thank you, Elder. Your people reminded us why we became warriors in the first place, not to conquer, to protect. That night, as slept peacefully in his new home, he dreamed of the old days, the desperate SOS sent into the void, the fear as death approached, and then the miracle, human ships appearing like avenging angels, breaking the siege, saving his people. He smiled in his sleep. The universe could be cruel, but it could also be kind. And humanity, those strange, fierce, gentle warriors, embodied both truths. On Earth, in the command center that coordinated the watch, new recruits prepared for their first assignments. They would carry on the tradition. They would answer the calls for help. They would stand between the darkness and the light. Admiral addressed them before they departed. The long silence is over. We are part of the galaxy again, but we are not the same species that left 300 years ago. We are wiser, more careful, more determined to build peace rather than wage war. He paused. "But make no mistake, we are also more dangerous than we have ever been, and we will use that danger to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The recruits saluted. They understood. They were humanity's promise to the galaxy. "We will not stand by while evil flourishes." Commander received a new transmission. She read it, smiled, and flagged it as routine. It was a thank you message from a species humanity had helped. There were dozens of these every day now. The galaxy was learning that cruelty had consequences, learning that the strong had responsibilities, learning that humanity had not forgotten how to fight, even after 300 years of peace. And somewhere in the deep darkness between stars, a predatory empire looked at reports of human fleet movements and decided to cancel its planned invasion of a neighboring system. The risk was too great. Humanity might hear about it. Humanity might come. Admiral Sangho sat in his quarters on the Academy station, looking at old photos from the Cascade Wars. Friends long dead, ships destroyed, a younger version of himself, harder, angrier. He thought about the path that had brought him here, the wars, the long silence, the awakening, the realization that peace required eternal vigilance. His communicator beeped. It was Commander. "Sir, sorry to disturb you, but I thought you'd want to know. The last of the freed slave populations has been successfully resettled. All 60 million beings now have new homes, protection, and hope for the future." Sangho felt something tight in his chest ease. "Thank you, Commander. That's good to hear." After the call ended, he looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, on a world, children were growing up free because humanity had answered a call. On a dozen other worlds, species lived without fear because the Titans stood watch. It was not the ending he had imagined when he entered sleep 300 years ago, but perhaps it was the ending humanity deserved. Not conquerors, not rulers, but guardians. The Titans never sleep again. The galaxy will never forget. And in the darkness, wherever cruelty raises its head, whoever threatens the innocent, they will hear the message that now echoes across the stars. "We are humanity, we remember, we are coming."